Everybody has an opinion on the Derek Chauvin George Floyd murder trial, and I want to give you mine. Welcome back, friends and frenemies. I'm glad to have you. Want to give you a quick video just giving you my thoughts on this trial that is supposed to be for the murder of George Floyd and what I think about it and why. We'll get into that in just a second. First, let me welcome you here, friends, frenemies. Welcome back. Glad you're here taking this time. Please don't forget, it would help the channel immensely if you can hit that like button if you agree. Know what I'm saying? Like our ability to be able to freely speak here. Also, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment if you have a comment below. Would love to see those. I'm glad that you're here at this channel. This is where we apply logic and conviction to news, faith, politics, culture, whatever is going on. I'm C. Scott, and this is my view. So we got this trial that's going on. It's just like a big deal. They have a bunch of channels that are covering this trial of Derek Chauvin, like wall to wall. They're showing it. I have opinions about trials being televised, and the circus that it creates. But in general, to get to the point, let me start to tell you what I think about the trial. Obviously, I'm sure everyone is aware of who St. George Floyd was and the incident that led to his death, but there are a whole lot of lies, misreportings, misinformation, things like that about the case. A lot of people saw a little bit of this and disconnected and said, that's terrible and things like that, but we should never do that. We should always look into what happened. And so the news reports are coming out, and a lot of it is fake news. There are people who have opinions on this matter, but they haven't actually researched or looked into the matter. So I was going to give you my view and what I think about it. So far in the trial, I don't think there's been any great revelations. There have been some things that have come out to kind of shed some more light, if you will, but I really don't think this is going to be a fair trial for Derek Chauvin. When they were doing the jury selection, there's people that are worried about backlash. If they acquit Derek Chauvin, what's going to happen to them? Are they going to get death threats? Are people going to be after them? Are people going to be upset with them? There are people putting out videos and stuff on social media talking about if he's acquitted, the cities are going to burn. And I don't think there's gonna be a good reaction kind of either way that it goes. I don't believe I don't believe he'll be acquitted. I don't believe the jury will have enough conviction if it's so. I don't believe that they'll have enough gumption to acquit Derek Chauvin, even if the prosecution doesn't meet the level that they're supposed to meet. So right now there are 3 charges against Derek Chauvin. 2 of them are murder charges and a homicide charge. And if you look at the actual words of the charges, I think they're going to have a really hard time with their top charge of I think it's murder 2. And they're going to have a really hard time proving that. I don't think they can really prove I don't think they can prove either of the murder charges. Maybe one of the homicide charges, maybe, but honestly, I think the charging was done poorly. I think the charging was political. It wasn't based on facts and evidence, and I think he possibly should be acquitted because of the charges. Now, I'm not saying that Derek Chauvin didn't do anything wrong, because I don't believe that. I do believe that he did something wrong, and I think that he would absolutely be guilty of a charge like negligent homicide or depraved indifference or failure to render aid. Now those don't carry the hefty sentences and things like that, and people probably wouldn't be happy with that, but the reason they wouldn't be happy with that is because of all the bad and misreporting. One of the things that's come out of the trial so far is they had the police chief on, and they were talking about some type of bias, like lens bias or camera bias or something like that. I think it was camera bias. And they showed how from one view it looked like Chauvin had his knee on the neck of George Floyd. Now St. George Floyd passed away, and I never thought that his knee was on his neck. I mean, that would be obvious that he was choking a person if his knee was on the neck. but based on the camera view, it looked like it could be on his neck if you don't look closely or pay attention. But they changed the camera view and they asked the police chief, well, where's his knee now? And he's like, well, it looks kind of like it's on his back. Now that's a huge deal, because everyone has been saying, on the right and on the left, black people, white people, all the people have been saying that the cop had his knee on St. George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes. It was on his neck. It was on his neck. That's all we've been hearing. But that's a really big deal, I think, if you have to step back and say, well, no, it wasn't on his neck, it was on his back. And then there was testimony, I guess, from St. George Floyd's girlfriend, and she was talking about how he was doing good, but 2 months before this incident, he had started doing drugs again, and he had fallen kind of hard or whatever, and so that's what led to the incident. So what happened in the incident? A lot of us saw immediately the video where it looked like the knee was on the neck, was really on the back. Everyone saw that and had an uproar, and everything was terrible. But what they waited to show was the full video. And they talked about how racist it was, and it was so terrible. But if you watch the full video, you don't see any racism. You see this officer who's being charged for murder being respectful. You see and know and understand that George Floyd did commit a crime which warranted the calling of police. And then you also see that George Floyd was not complying with officers, and so he was supposed to get in the car. The reason he ended up on the ground is because instead of getting in the car after he was cuffed, he was pushing around and doing all this stuff, and he was too big, they couldn't handle him, and so they end up putting him on the ground to control the situation. Now, if you watch the full video, Floyd was saying that he couldn't breathe when he was standing up fine and getting into the car. Now, the police didn't know that he had ingested a deadly amount of a illegal drug. They didn't know that was going on. All they knew was, there was a counterfeit bill, and we're trying to sort this out, and he's not compliant. There were 2 other black guys that were in the car. Everything was fine with them. So if the cops were so racist and so terrible and just trying to kill black people, why didn't those 2 have the same issue? Well, a lot of it does have to do with the drugs that he ingested into his system. A lot of people don't want to hear that. You say it's cop out, or it's this, or it's that. That has a whole lot to do to explain his behavior and his health. They also, I think the autopsy showed that he had COVID either at the time of his death, or he had it before that and had recovered it, something like that. But that also affects your breathing. But if you watch that earlier tape, it shows that the cop wasn't being mean or rude or racist or whatever. I think, in my own personal point of view, I do believe that the officer Chauvin did do wrong, but he didn't kill him. He didn't kill George Floyd, but he also didn't help him live, because he was sitting on his back and he was not paying attention to the suspect that was in his custody. Now, I believe that he wasn't paying attention to the suspect in his custody because of the crowd that was around. Everybody talks about the look on Chauvin's face and stuff like that. That look was not about George Floyd, who he was kneeling on. That look was about the crowd of people who were being defiant and cussing and saying all this different stuff about how bad these officers were. So the officer, instead of paying attention to his suspect, which he should have been doing, he starts paying attention to the crowd, and he starts defying them, saying, I'm not going to do anything, I'm not going to go anywhere. And that's why I believe that he didn't notice or pay attention when Floyd had passed out. So I think it's more about what the crowd was doing and him having to deal with that than what was going on with George Floyd. Now, again, I do believe that George Floyd put himself in that position and situation because of what he had taken into his system, and the fact that he didn't say anything, so they didn't know that they needed to respond to a drug overdose. All they knew is that he was not compliant, he had a sheet, there might have been some history, but I don't even know if there was any history but with them being known and things like that. So today the medical examiner is supposed to come out and give some information. That might be a big deal, might be informative, but they're supposed to be finding out if there was any bruising on his body to find out how forceful the officer was. Some people are saying, well, they had like one expert on that said the fentanyl in his system wouldn't have slowed his breathing, but normally it does slow breathing, and people pass out when they have drug overdoses, but we don't think that, you know, he had passed out from a drug overdose. It was just from the knee on his back. It's all types of crazy nonsense that you really have to weed through. So yes, I believe Chauvin is guilty of harm, but I don't think the way that they charged him was legit. I don't think he should go down for the charges that they put up on him. I think there was one, the last charge, I think it was the homicide charge. I think it has like a 10-year sentence or something like that maximum. They might be able to get him on that, in my opinion, but I really think they should have charged him better to make sure that he would go to jail. If he's acquitted, it's 100% of the fault of, I believe it's Keith Ellison and the people who came up with the charges. They're charging trying to send a message, or they're charging out of their emotions, not out of the facts and what the case actually represents. And we should look at that as justice. That's what we want done in these different cases. It's really going to be hard for the truth to come out. It's going to be hard for people to accept because of all the misinformation and all the emotionalism and all the stuff that has happened in the days since this originally happened. But in my view, Chauvin is guilty. He did harm. He didn't render aid, but I don't believe he's guilty of murder. We'll see how the rest of the trial goes. I don't think Chauvin is going to be acquitted, but I do think he's going to be unfairly charged. That's just my view. That's just my point. We'll see what happens through the rest of the trial. I'm C. Scott. That's how I see it.